Good morning. Yes, I am loud enough. Okay, as Bart said, and I'm already playing with a clicker, I'm be presenting a work that is led by my former advisor, Dr. Ng, but I'm happy that I get to share that with you today and kickstart the RecSys That Care session. As most of us who have been presenting have been doing, I'm going to ask you that for the technical question, we use the poster time so that we can mingle and network more. But I wanted to use this time to really kind of bring a little bit of awareness on this topic and to really give you the context of the work that we have been doing. So when I started this work, I admit that I wasn't as familiar with the topic, and so it took me quite a bit to get familiar with the domain. So I thought that at least I would share a definition of autism is a complex neurobehavioral, I can pronounce this better sometimes, condition. And so it's something that the symptoms for autism vary all around the spectrum. There are different ranges of the condition that you can exhibit. And so it's also called autism spectrum disorder. And the acronym ASD is something that you hear me say quite a bit today, so I thought it was worth discussing. So what does it mean? It means that people that suffer from autism are going to have challenges in terms of how they're going to exhibit repetitive behavior. They're going to have some social impediments. What else? Some communication skills that are going to be problematic for them. And so it's important to know that 1 in 59 children suffer from autism or exhibit some sort of symptom of autism. And then it's also a problem that affects 1.5 million adults in the US. And why do we care specifically about that part of the population? I'm touching the check, I'm sorry. It's because 50,000 individuals every year kind of transition from being children to kind of moving to adulthood. And at that time, a lot of the services and the help and the support that exists for children no longer exists when it comes to adult, or is not as prominent. And so one of the things we want to do is to help out that part of the population, adults with ASD. How do we think we can do that? There are many ways. We focus on the one we can try to make a difference on, which is focusing on games. But it cannot be any type of games, not something that you play for fun, but it needs to be something that helps people with autism develop the skills or improve the skills that they need to lead better lives. And so some of those skills is how to handle their speech. One of the ones that I thought it was the most challenging was how to recognize facial expression or recognition of emotions. It's something that most of us take for granted. I can see some of you are kind of falling asleep, and I was like, okay, they're bored. And so it's just a reaction, and it makes it part of the conversation. But for individuals with autism, that's not always the case. And so creating games that can help them do that or be able to interact better, it will help them function better within society. Other thing is eye contact. They're not used to making eye contact. Or engaging in conversation, that back and forward, that is not just somebody talking, it's just the kind of receiving feedback and continuing moving on. And then, of course, the audio communication is not only listening, but understanding what is happening. And so the idea would be to develop games that showcase these characteristics. And so why do we need to develop games? Because when it comes to adults, the games that are available are mostly appealing to a younger crowd or to children. And so there are games for children with autism or to help children with autism develop some skills, but those are not the games that adults are going to relate to. And so the key would be to create new games that are interactive and that they can use and help and enjoy, and that in the meantime help them practice or develop most of these skills that they need to develop. And so this is where RecSys can help. It's not enough that we create these games, it's that then we put this game in the hand of the right individual. And here it's not just saying, okay, we'll find something that they like. It needs to go beyond that. It needs to be something that they like, but also that responds to the particular challenge, their particular abilities, and what is the skills that they want to develop. And so this is kind of, I don't want to say the word work in progress, but it's kind of the starting point for a path of research that we want to focus on, which is on developing not only the games, but also the recommendation framework that can help find the right game so that it makes a difference. And so this is where we started. You're going to see that the techniques that we use are techniques that you're all going to be familiar with. But the idea was to say, can we apply them? Do they still work when it comes to helping these individuals? And where do we find a challenge, or where do we have a hole in these algorithms or in these strategies, and how do we make it better? And so the starting point was to look at matrix factorization, and then complement that, for example, with dealing with categories. What are the categories of games that different individuals like? Looking at the complexity analysis, the complexity of the game. That's the type of complexity I mean. Do you play it at a beginner level? Are you ready to engage in a more expert level? And so going from the very beginning to the most expert, where is that individual situated for the particular game? Doing sentiment analysis on if there's some sort of review, on some sort of feedback that the individuals provided on the games. And last but not least, using LDA to try to understand what are the topics of interest of the games that these users have played before, and see if we are able to give them new games that are alike. And so that's what we call the shorthand for personalization. And so that would be the starting point. One of the things that we were kind of playing with towards the end was the idea of the categories seem to, when we treat them as one category, seem to be too restricted, and we kept recommending often the same type of categories. And so to introduce a little bit of diversity, we enhanced the work that Dr. Ng and one of his students have published last year at WI, if I'm not mistaken, yes, on tripartite graph. And the idea was to be able to give treat categories differently and being able to find new categories of interest for these individuals. So the next challenge, how do we evaluate this? We are dealing with a population that might not be as accessible when we try to gather feedback, that might be not be as able to give us feedback in the first place, to actually interact and say what they like and what they didn't and what they find helpful or not. This is a sensitive audience. I also do some work with like K-12 population, and that's kind of the case. They are non-traditional populations, and so it's more challenging to set up the right experiments and to set up the right environment to get these evaluations. And another challenge was that the development of these games, it's ongoing. And so we have right now 6 games that we're working on, but they're at the very initial stages, and so we want to see how they work, but we also want to see how they affect the recommendation, and so it's kind of like a parallel evaluation. So what we did is we got some informal feedback from an institution in Provo that is called CineView, that is for adults with ASD, kind of like a day center. And we got informal feedback on the games, and we got informal feedback on the recommendation. And when we thought, again, informally, through the teachers that are at that institution, that we were on the right path, we kind of move on to more evaluations on the algorithm itself. And so we had undergrads and grad appraisers that we did an initial analysis on see how they perceive the recommendations by Amazon, by Barnes & Nobles, and the ones that we were generating using the shorthand algorithm, and see if they consistently picked among the results the one that were more geared to develop skills, the skills that we wanted in the games and that we suggested earlier on. And based on average precision at 1 and 3 and MRR, we saw that was the case. Then we kind of move on to evaluating that idea of, can we expand the categorization to give more diverse set of results? And we figured out that yes, we could do that. And so at that point, we felt that we had the right background or the right starting point to now move on and really dig deeper into this problem and say, can we really find out what works and what doesn't when we deploy this and when we have individuals with ASD use what we're working on? And so the main takeaway that I hope you have from this starting talk this morning is that ASD can profoundly impact and affect individuals' ability to lead a productive and independent life, something that sometimes we take it for granted. And so we're focusing on continuing to developing games. Dr. Ng has a team of students that are working also with game development specialists to continue to enhance the pool of games that they have. And we want to continue to work on recommenders. We have the starting point with the short head and the long tail strategies that I have mentioned, but we want to be able to blend those two and then really dive into a year-long clinical study. And we're partnering with Scenic View to make that happen so that we can know at the end of 1 year what are the games that they work or why they work and which ones are the ones that don't. And the same with the recommender. What are the parts of the recommender that are helping? What are the pinpoints that we need to really dig further and address in improving the recommendation? And how can we actually help these individuals live more productive lives and develop more skills so that they can function on a regular basis? And with that, my time is super up. So that's all I have to share with you this morning.
Thank you for that talk. There's time for some questions. Please move to the microphones if you do have a question. Is someone getting in or? Oh, yeah. No? Getting out?
No.
Okay.
It's
then
too
I can
early
ask
for
a
questions. Maybe that's it. But I'll be at the posters during the lunch, and so...
I don't mind asking a question myself.
Go ahead, yes.
So one of the things that I was thinking about is as you are now moving towards testing with real individuals with ASD, I imagine that they have sometimes trouble of expressing themselves. Does that have an influence on preference elicitation? And how would you deal with that? And more generally, what are the challenges of doing recommender systems research and user-centric recommender systems research with individuals with ASD?
So I think, and this is just like kind of like a personal opinion, I'm sure Dr. Ng has been working with this for longer and he'll have something else to say, but my main argument here is that I tend to work more with the algorithms, and this is one of my first works moving towards the other side, and what I have found that the key is finding the right team to do this. Like the computer science on its own, I cannot just pretend to know what is going to be a good game to develop this type of skills. And so it's teaming up with the right people. And so the team at Scenic View have been amazing. And they have teachers and they have doctors and they're really engaged in making this a reality and be able to measure properly. And they're used to dealing with these individuals on a daily basis. And so they'll be key for that evaluation.
So work in multidisciplinary teams. That's a great
exactly.
takeaway from your talk. Thank you so much. Let's thank the speaker again.